What's up, fam? This is Bro Capitalist coming at you. And today I just had a quick thought about agency and immigrants. All right. So you may or may not know, but I immigrated to Japan in the 90s. I spent about almost a decade there. And one thing I noticed immediately coming from Detroit was the way I was viewed by other people. It was always positive, with the exception of visits to Tokyo, where sometimes it wasn't so positive. Nothing to the point of like, oh, they're racist, but you know, because of I'll just say it, man, because of like not a lot of Nigerians who ran like clubs and stuff like that, their behavior wasn't the most polite. I'll just say that. I was mistaken for a Nigerian from time to time. But other than that, I mean, my time in Japan was awesome. I always say my worst day in Japan was better than my best day in America, and that still holds true today. And that is because no matter where I went in Japan, with that exception of Tokyo from time to time, people looked at me in a positive light. There was the assumption that I was successful. There was an assumption that I was a good person. There was an assumption that I wasn't a bum or a criminal. Why? Because criminals don't immigrate. I mean, that's a hard, fast rule. Now, you can say criminals migrate. You can say the most, you know, nice people, the nicest people in the world may not come across borders legally, right? And you do have something called a political refugee. So you got somebody who was killing up people in their country. Regimes change. Now they're like, oh, get me out of here, right? But for the most part, if you immigrate, to a country legally, fill out the forms, expose who you are, let that government know where you're immigrating to, that you won't be a burden on their society because you have your own means to take care of yourself for at least a time, right? And if not you got family there that can take care of you, blah, blah, blah. So there's a hard, fast rule that immigrants, they're good, right? Why? Because think about what a person has to do to immigrate to another country. They have to leave everything they know, everybody they know. If they got a job, they got to leave their job. Family, you're leaving some family behind. Friends, you're probably leaving all your friends behind. So despite that comfortability, if you're comfortable, right? You decide to get up and leave. You're not taken. You decide to use your own will, your own gumption, your own decision making to leave everything you know to go somewhere else because you believe it will be better somewhere else. And you also know that you will have to struggle in most cases, you will have to struggle, but you believe in yourself to know that I'm a struggle. I'm down for that, but eventually it will be better than where I'm at, right? So let's put that on the table. That's the foundation of the conversation. Immigrants and agency. Now, I want to talk about a group of immigrants to America. So my ancestors, who were captured by Africans, sold and made slaves, marched to the coast, and were bought by Europeans at the coast. They were put on ships and they landed in what's now called America through no agency of their own. So these are immigrants without agency. And over the course of 400 years, there's a culture that developed amongst that people that lacks agency. It lacked agency and it lacked basically individual responsibility, and agency can be kind of synonymous. And any concepts of freedom. They only knew freedom as it applied to other people, but most of them didn't know freedom as it would apply to themselves. And a saying by a lot of pro-slavery advocates was, why would you want these slaves to go free? All they're going to do is go up north and die in freedom, because what they were trying to point out is they don't know how to take care of themselves. Now, whether they're right or wrong here or there's some facts in that statement, right? So over the course of 400 years, you got a group of people in a geographic location who's taken care of by someone else. Doesn't matter if you're a man, doesn't matter if you're a woman, doesn't matter if you're a child. If you get sick, if you're a white slave master, black slave master, or Native American slave master, if they take care of that hospital bill, you don't. If you need some new clothes, the slave master, white, black, Native American, they take care of that. Your food, the slave master take care of that, right? Everything is taken care of. You have no agency. You have no individual responsibility, and you have no freedom. So in exchange for your agency, what this group of people, my ancestors, got was food, clothes, shelter, medical bills, forced labor, right? Then fast forward, this group of people were set free. Were they freed by their own agency in mass? No. So before we get to the Civil War, because that's what I'm talking about, let's roll it back a little. Over the course of 400 years, there's very few slave revolts that we know of. You got tales here and there about slave runaways. And what do the slave revolt and the individual runaway have in common? They're seeking freedom. They want to utilize their own agency. Although they may have been comfortable, 3 hots in the cot, shelter, medical bills, their medical is taken care of, whatever comfort slavery gave them, they felt it's something better outside of slavery. They wanted to immigrate to a land where they are free, right? So that's the slave revolters and that's the individual runaways. But for the most part, I don't care if you could say, people will say, well, running away, you get shot, killed, whatever. I don't care about that. The reality is, for the most part, most slaves didn't run away. Most slaves didn't revolt over the course of 400 years. So Civil War happens. Even then, the slaves could not use their own agency to free themselves. They had to rely on the white people in the North, foreigners across the oceans to send money to help the white people in the North secure their freedom. Secure their freedom. So now this group of people, my ancestors, are free. With no history of utilizing their own agency to take care of themselves. They have no idea what freedom means, right? But they're just out there. They don't have nowhere to live, but they're just out there, no means to make money. But guess what they did? As Thomas Sowell often says, within a generation, a group of people who were illiterate, half of them became literate in a generation. So obviously they were on their grind, trying to figure out what freedom meant, trying to figure out what agency actually means to them. A lot of them started, if they weren't a carpenter before, they just worked in the field. A lot of them went out to try and get carpenter skills so that they can rely on themselves to feed themselves, house themselves, and take care of their family. Well, what happened? Over the course of time, these people who had never, for generations, ever relied on themselves to take care of themselves and their family, got hit in the face with reality. Freedom is hard. The ability to take care of yourself, sustain a living, that's hard. It ain't about being fair or unfair. And when you put on top of that, you got people around you who don't like you, let's say the racist people, right? And people who are constantly trying to undermine you, it's really hard, right? So this group of people, without that foundation that, let's say, a new immigrant from China or a new immigrant from modern day Africa or an immigrant from Russia has, like when that guy gets here or that family, the parents get here, they struggle. And then when their kids come along and their kids are in high school struggling, their kids can look to their parents and say, hey, well, let's get easier. And the parents will say, in the meantime, it's going to be hard as hell. Think about what I had to do. I had to come here, learn new language. I went through 50 jobs before I can find one that support a family. Didn't sleep at night. Nobody liked me because my English was messed up. Blah, 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 right? Well, that child can rely on that information to make him stronger. What did the newly emancipated have? They didn't really have that. So when someone came along and said, hey, life is really hard. You shouldn't have to struggle this hard. Life's unfair. We're going to take care of you with Social Security, federal minimum wage laws. And hey, W.E.B. Du Bois, why don't you come out here and try and get African Americans to vote the Democratic ticket? So that's how you get people who voted Republican because they helped free them start to switch over to vote for Democrats, because the Democrats was offering them something familiar at a time when things were really hard, right? So fast forward, and so the Wilson administration, that was around 1913, 20, around that time. So you get a group of people who were freed by the Republican Party eventually start to turn their back on the Republican Party and start voting for the people who wanted to keep them in chains. Now you go up to the 1960s, and now that same, I guess, ideology or value system of, hey, don't worry, life is hard. Your agency is probably not enough, especially with all these races around here. You need to let the government come in and help you. And that's when you start to get what's called the welfare state. And now the government is starting to replace the family, right? First, they made the husband redundant. And I've talked about that before. So now you get a whole bunch of, instead of 85% of kids being born to two-parent household in the 1920s, now in the 70s, 80s, now it's like 75 to 80% of Black American kids are being born to single-family households. The family is being replaced. The family unit is being replaced by the government, and the dad is just redundant. So I believe that's why the democratic value system is so appealing to urban Black Americans, is because there's a familiarity to it, to the culture, where agency is not the all and be all, right? Like if you think the Wild Wild West, the cowboys, I know that you can say, they were free, but it was all about individual responsibility, individual freedom. It was ingrained in them. Even now in Appalachia, in some parts, I know in some parts of Appalachia, everybody on welfare, but there's there are some people who just refuse government assistance. They'd rather be poor. They got too much pride, blah, 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 right? There are people like that. And there were Black Americans like that in the 50s. No, we don't want affirmative action. We're going to do this on our own. But they were outnumbered by those who, no big deal. I mean, the government want to fork out some money. I'm down with that. But when you think of that, isn't that just replacing the white, Black, Native American slave owner for the government to a degree? Now, it's not the same. You're kind of free to go as you please. They can't technically force you to work. I mean, they can't throw you in jail for hanging out on the corner. They call vagrancy laws. So, there's something to that. But hey, good news or news. Currently, 2023, you're starting to see a lot of African Americans, men, become more and more attracted to the Republican philosophy, value system of individual's agency is important. Individual freedom and individual responsibility. I think it's becoming more attractive because I think it's natural for men to want to provide. And I'm speaking in generalities. They want to provide something, right? If not money, protection, advice, they want to be the provider. And for women, on the other hand, I think it's natural, speaking in general terms, that they want to be nurturing and to be taken care of. Right now, I'm not talking about all women. Obviously, if you're a female CEO making $2 million every single year, you don't need nobody taking care of you. But I'm pretty sure you're somewhere in there. There's a very nurturing being, right? And I think the fact that the democratic value system of I'm my brother's keeper, let me take care of you, let me protect you from all the races, really rings with African American females more than it rings with African American males. And I'm just hoping that one day the African American males, community, can just take a step back and realize what's good about this country. And I don't think in mass, we never experienced that, because what's good about this country is what makes this country difficult. When you immigrate to America, when they said bring us our poor and all that, they didn't want those people to come on and get on welfare. They wanted people who thought they had the agency to make a better life for themselves if they only had the opportunity. They said, hey, we welcome you with open arms. You got all the opportunity in the world here. Utilize your own agency and make it happen. And that's what they did. Now, that's different if you're coming from Honduras, and because somebody said, hey, all you got to do is get in America, you can get on welfare, you can send your kids to public school, they'll have to take you in the hospital. That's totally different, right? That's a migrant. And I'm not disparaging them, but I'm just saying, if you're an immigrant using your own agency to get to America, you're ready for the struggle. You're ready. You got to grind, but you're up for it. African Americans, when we got here, it was through someone else's agency. When we were freed, it was through someone else's agency. And now a lot of Democratic parties are still trying to suppress your own agency. So when next time you're thinking about a political party, think about that. Where's your pride at? Think about it. You're in the greatest country that ever was. And all that country asks from you, is to be you, depend on you. And a lot of us just don't have that in our DNA because it was stripped from us. So what do you do about that? Find yourself an immigrant. Talk to them. Figure out how they do it. Figure out their value system. Figure out their expectations. Read some books. And most of all, don't just let somebody come out there and hand you money and say, I'm going to take care of you. Because guess who do that? Pimps. All right, y'all. Hope you got something out of this. Like, share, and subscribe. Peace. I'm out.
I just wanted to remind you guys to check out thebrokecapitalist.com. You'll find some awesome books there, including a historical fantasy fiction series that I star in, called Ideas in Blood.